Hey, it's Nathan Crockett, and I'm recording this specifically for Bible Doctrines students, getting you ready for test one. So a couple different things we're going to do here. One is I want to walk you through the test. There's about 70 questions on the test, 10 points of listing, 3 different matching sections, a really big multiple choice section, and about 20 points of true-false. So at the end of this video, I want to take you section by section through those, give you some sample questions to make sure that you're ready for that, tell you specifically what lectures to be focusing on of the various lectures that we've had so far. I also recorded a section where I went through each of the PowerPoints that we had used for the various lectures, and I tried to take the key slides from each of those. So kind of delete a lot of the extra stuff, but the key things that I knew the test would be focusing on, and then talk you through those. I've been having technical difficulties, so what I thought would take 20 minutes is now going on a couple hours, more than 2 hours. Like 5 or 6 times I tried doing just a screen recording, then I also tried through PowerPoint. So the best that I have so far is a 15-minute take of me walking through PowerPoint, but only the first third of it or so will you see a video of me and hear me talking. The rest is the information that I was talking about, but for whatever reason, you won't hear my voice. So you still might want to watch it because I'm highlighting the key things that will be on the test. And then at the end of that, it will come back to just me looking at you, and I'm going to put the test on my teleprompter. I actually just printed out the test, a couple, or I guess 130 copies of it, and have it sitting here in my office. So finish the test. I'm going to walk you through section by section. So first, we'll hit an overview, key parts of each PowerPoint of the various lectures. I'm also planning to email you the full PowerPoints as PDFs, key parts of the PowerPoints, and then after that, so make sure you stay tuned to the end. I'll come back and just walk you section by section through the test for the last several minutes of this video.
Hey, it's Nathan Crockett here, and I want to work with you getting you ready for test one for Bible Doctrines. So I'm going to just quickly go through some of the highlights from the lectures, and then after that, I'm going to actually be looking at the test and working with you through that. I'll pull up a test copy, and I'll be looking at it and talking you through the different sections of the test and giving you some sample questions from the test. The very first lecture was Welcome to Bible Doctrines. I introduced myself to you, asked you a bunch of questions about you and on those half sheets of paper. Then we had the first lecture where I said you'll want to take notes. We looked at what is theology, that ultimately theology we saw as the study of God. So that's a basic working definition, right? We saw several objections to studying theology. We talked about those as class discussion. Some people say it's boring or impractical or complicated. And particularly, we saw that for an unbeliever, it is unnatural. It's not natural for an unbeliever to want to study theology. And we talked about all the reasons for that. The categories of theology, we talked through 10 in order. But before we get there, we talked about historical theology and practical theology that tend to be easy to understand. And it's easily confused when we start talking about exegetical versus biblical versus systematic theology. We actually put together a chart that hopefully is helpful to you on that between exegetical, biblical, and systematic. Exegetical is microscopic, analyzing textual details, the truth from one text. Biblical is macroscopic, a broad sweep of the context. How do the parts fit into the bigger picture? And then systematic theology you could call kaleidoscopic, trying to organize and categorize truth and the logical conclusions beyond just the direct statements of Scripture. Again, I'm sending you these PowerPoints as PDFs, but I'm just working through with you here, trying to hit some of the highlights. The questions that they answer: exegetical theology, answering the question, what does one text say? Biblical theology, what does the text say, much more broadly? And systematic theology, the broadest question of all, what is true about God? In a sense, good systematic theology builds on good biblical theology.
Okay, so let's talk through the test specifically. There is a listing question that's 10 points. You probably can guess what that is. You are going to need to, in the blank space on your grade master, so be sure to bring a grade master and a number 2 pencil. And in the blank space at the back of your grade master, you will write in order the 10 categories of systematic theology. Remember, it starts with bibliology, then theology proper, Christology, pneumatology, angelology. Those are the 5 we covered this semester, but I wanted you to know all 10 in order. Hopefully you're prepared to do that. Do not forget to know those. That's 10 easy points coming into the test. There's also a true-false section with about 20 questions on it. And so let me just talk you through some of the types of questions. There's a question on there about the definition of revelation. There's a question about the Textus Receptus, a question about the Westcott and Hort edition, a question about does Scripture depend upon archaeology to confirm its veracity? The word canonization, what does that word mean? Under which theological category would we talk about Satan and demons? Because remember I said anything we want to talk about, it fits under one of those 10 categories. The Council of Carthage, what was significant about that? There's a question about the Apocrypha, a question about general revelation versus special revelation, a question about whether or not we should use proof texts. Remember, I don't try to make true-false questions to be trick questions, but every part of a question needs to be true in order for it to be true. If 90% is true and 10% is false, that makes the entire statement false. There's a true-false question about Elizabethan English as it relates to the King James. Okay, there are matching sections. Let me talk about those, and then we'll get to the multiple choice. So probably some of the most missed questions, there's a matching section from your reading on how we got the English Bible. So there'll be certain statements about the First English Bible or Tischendorf or whatever, and you'll have to match those to the Coverdale Bible, the Wycliffe Bible, the Gutenberg Bible, the Geneva Bible, the Codex Sinaiticus, the Codex Vaticanus, the Bishop's Bible, the Latin Vulgate. So you'll have all those options, and you'll have statements, and you'll have to match it to the correct option. There's a matching section covering the various views of inspiration. You remember when we talked about people that hold to the partial inspiration view, or natural inspiration, or Bardian inspiration, or dictation inspiration, or concept inspiration. Those will be your choices, and then you'll have to match that to the correct definition. And then there's a section where you'll have to match the different aspects of theology, like we talked about biblical theology, exegetical theology, systematic theology. If you remember that, one of our earliest lectures, we even talked about historical theology and practical theology, that visual. You'll have to match those. I'll give you a definition of one of those, and you'll have to match it, whether it's biblical theology, practical theology, historical theology, exegetical theology, systematic theology. So 3 matching sections, a good-sized true-false section, about 20 true-false, the 10 points of listing, and then the rest of the test, about 70 points total, is going to be multiple choice. So there's a question about presuppositions. There's a question about the common objections. Remember, we talked about objections like, well, theology is boring, or it's impractical, or it's too complicated, things like that. There's a question about inerrancy. What can we allow for in the text and still maintain that the Bible is inerrant? Can we have an approximation? Could we have the use of non-scientific language or non-technical language? What can we have in the Bible still be inerrant? You need to know the definitions that we gave of inerrancy, confluence, canonization, inspiration, because sometimes for the multiple choice, I'll just give you a definition and you'll have to match. Is that canonization? Is that inerrancy? Is that inspiration? So be familiar with those definitions. Remember, AD 397, the Council of Carthage gives the official list of New Testament canonical books. So that's a key date and a key council to remember. Normally, I'm not big on having you remember all the councils, but that is a really important one. Certain modern translators or translations undermine biblical doctrines. Okay, that is due to what? Is that because of an unqualified translator? Is that due to a corrupt manuscript? Is that due to prejudicial interpretation? Okay, so remember how many Greek manuscripts we have and how many Hebrew manuscripts we have. Those could make good multiple choice questions. There's multiple choice questions about 2 Timothy 3:16, which was a memory verse and also a verse we talked a lot about. Multiple choice questions about 2 Peter 1:20 and 21. And then also a couple other key passages like 1 Timothy 5:18 that I told you needed to know about, and 2 Peter 3:16. Those are key passages. Hopefully you're studying those, you're familiar with them, you know the importance of them. Okay, just looking through here. Which of the following statements is not one of the requirements for studying theology? We talked about specific requirements. If you're going to study theology, you need to be humble. You need to have a spirit of worship and so on. So there's a question on there about that. There's a question about the Bible being written over a period of 1,500 years in 3 different languages by 40 different authors. You remember we talked quite a bit about that. There's a multiple choice question about that. A question about what do we mean by canonization? What is not correct about the canonization process of Scripture in the early church? A question about general revelation, creation, conscience. Okay. Which of the following is not a true statement about special revelation? You're going to have 3 or 4 options, and you have to tell me which one is not a true statement about special revelation. A question about when we talk about illumination, what do we mean by that? There's a question about Josephus. Remember, you needed to know Psalm 19, Romans 1, Romans 2, when we're talking about general revelation, key passages. Okay, don't forget the 10 categories of systematic theology in order. I'm praying that you do well on this test. Hopefully this video is helpful. It took me longer to record it than I thought it would. I'm not sure why the equipment kept it looked like it's recording, and then I'd finish it all and say, oh, there was a problem, none of it got recorded. So hopefully this is helpful, and I'm praying that you do well on the test.